Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt,
And I'm Denny Dumas.
and this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
One of the questions we get asked often early in the year is now the right time to buy? Is now the right time to sell? So we want to address that, and I don't know if there's necessarily a right answer other than just kind of sharing our thoughts based on what we're seeing currently in January 2020, as well as the last couple months. But James, I'll let you share your opinion, and then I'll go into my thoughts.
Yeah, let's do this. For one's sake, the purpose of this is to talk about strategic reasons for a buyer and seller to sell in, say, a January, February, early season market, and ignore the people that have to sell. Quite often there's a rush of listings in January that is just overflow from listings that didn't sell in the fall. So clearly those are anxious people that have been on the market that are just anxious to get it back on the market. But ignoring the have to sell crowd, the why would I sell in January, February crowd, and the biggest reason to me that sticks out is typically sellers are wanting to buy after. One of the advantages to selling early in the year is to put yourself in a buying position with certainty by the spring, so that you have, if you sell in a January, February month, you're in a shopping position in a March, April month, and quite frankly, you're going to have better selection. You know how much money you're working with, and that's a very legitimate reason to sell early in the year. Another thing that comes to mind, the unpredictability of weather in January is you could list a property and end up having a snowstorm for 2 weeks, which is not ideal for showing it. But the nice part about a January listing or a February listing is there's lower competition typically. So, in a typical market, it's a little bit before the right time of the season to sell. But for some products, you can have great luck with it or great success if there's nothing else available. Every year is different though, Denny.
Totally. I think talking about this year specifically, I think the upsizers are in a pretty good position. So someone looking to sell a 2-bedroom condo or a small townhouse and moving up into that single family, those single families have been hit on price point wise in the last 18 to 24 months, upwards of 20% in some markets, whereas condos have seemed to hold their value quite a bit better. And I'd say are maybe off peak pricing 5 to 10%, depending on where you're located. So that gap between that condo that you've been living in for a few years, maybe built up a bunch of equity in, and that single family home that is the dream, that gap's narrowed quite a bit. And I think it's a pretty good opportunity to make that jump early in the year. Inventory is pretty low right now. So even just in a couple experiences that we've seen in the first few weeks of the year, sometimes you get lucky when inventory is low. And we sold a condo first week of January that got 3 offers in 5 days, basically just because there was nothing else like it on the market. So that's one thing to consider too. Often we see a little bit of a luckier sale or a better sale conditions in terms of terms and conditions in the offer or things that you're looking for, like a long completion if you're wanting to put yourself in a buying position early in the year, just because you have the leverage of low inventory.
Yeah, and I think you highlighted a good point. Buying up, buying up meaning going from a condo to a house or a small house to a big house. I'm a big fan of buying up as a reason to list early in the year. And part of it is, right now, January 2020, we're in a price-sensitive market. So the lower price points, the first-time buyer price points, entry home price points, they're much more active than the luxury condos and luxury homes. So the higher the price, the less the demand. And so it's a great reason. The gap, as you mentioned, has closed, and it's a great reason to sell your, say 1 or 2 bedroom condo to make that leap to a house, because the gap is closer than it's ever been. But outside of that, we're experiencing it now. If you list a luxury property in January, you're going to have people that like it, but they have to oftentimes sell something first. And so if you're listing a 1 or 2 bedroom condo, more likely to be a first time buyer buying that's ready to go anytime. But if you're listing a $2-3 million home, you're going to have people that love it, and they're going to walk in the door and they're going to realize, oh, I have to sell my house. So there's certain products that are more successful, and I personally love the idea of buying up in an early year. So meaning list your low priced condo or townhouse to get in that house, that makes perfect logic to me.
And just want to explain the idea of putting yourself in a good buying position early in the year. So a lot of the people that we work with, a lot of people that are moving up need the equity out of their current condo to be able to afford that next purchase. So putting yourself in a good buying position, what we're talking about is listing your condo early in the year, having a firm offer in place so you know exactly what the sale figure is, and then being able to go shopping in the next few months. Typically the best months of available inventory are March, after that spring break.
Yeah, spring break.
Weekend after that week, into like June, July. So selling in January, February gives you those funds, or at least allows you to know exactly what number you're playing with to be able to shop in those busy months.
Yeah, and I guess if a seller didn't intend to buy right away and they were just strictly selling and they were trying to be strategic about it, the months that we've had the most success in the last few years has probably been more of a April, May, June, sort of zone, sometimes July as well, but May and June particularly. So if you're not buying afterwards and you want to have take advantage of the seasonality of the market, January, February is probably a little bit soon. Mm-hmm. If you're selling a luxury property, particularly, that market is much more seasonal. And just from the perspective that most of the buyers buying luxury have to sell something, so they're more likely to be in a buying position in May or June. Mm-hmm. From a buyer perspective, though, a lot of the intent behind buying in January and February is to try to snag something before the market heats up. In a hot or an upward tracking year, the prices can sometimes jump. Like we've seen it in 2016, 2017. You can have a 10% plus run from January to May and June, and that's very frustrating for buyers. So if you snag something in a hot market in January and February, you're likely to feel pretty good about it by the time June rolls around.
Typically what puts pressure on upward prices is low inventory. And we've seen low inventory in the fall, and the activity improved, and we started seeing things like multiple offers and no subjects again late in 2019. So to me, if you're looking at buying in 2020, I think the first few months of the year are where you're going to get the best deals.
Yeah, and you nailed it with the low inventory. Mm-hmm. Fall can tell us some signs on where the market's going. If the fall inventory is light, expect some pent-up demand. Mm-hmm. And if the January, February inventory is light, after a light fall, it's going to unleash at some point in time. Yeah. And once it happens, the way the market climbs is when there's low inventory and more demand. It just seems that every sale that happens after, like every second, like a 2-bedroom condo sells in a building for $600, the next one sells for $625, the next one sells for $650, and it just climbs, and that's kind of what we've seen in those crazy markets where you see a 20% run in less than a year.
You maybe touched on this a little bit, but I think we should address who shouldn't buy. You mentioned the luxury properties, or who shouldn't be thinking about real estate in the first couple months of the year, if anyone. You mentioned luxury properties more due to weather and how much daylight there is. It gets pitch dark at 4:30 p.m. right now.
Yeah, every area depends, Denny. It depends. But yeah, if we're talking about kind of in general, unless there's strategic buying reasons or they have to sell, usually the higher on listings, we encourage them to wait a little bit, not list early in the year and give it a few months. Builders, land value, the busy street listings, the weird layouts, the products that have, say, a niche buyer market or have a significant negative, I'd say those ones you need a little more luck and market momentum behind you. So that might be better to wait for a busier month. Mm-hmm. But anyone that's kind of buying after they sell, and whether it's the same value or a higher value, for most cases, I don't see much of a problem with it. I think this February will be my 12th year in real estate. In the time that I've been a realtor, I think I've seen one year where January and February had better successive sales, like better sales than May and June. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe 2 years. There might've been 2 years in that window, but it's rare. So in most cases, Prices tend to be higher in May and June than they are in January and February. Doesn't mean all the time. But sorry, what was your question? Who shouldn't do it?
Yeah, should anyone not? And
Yeah.
I think something I'd add to that is just is the downsizer type
The downside.
client who maybe has been living in their home for 20 years and looking to go into the condo. Just the inventory of condos is so light right now that if you do sell your home in the first couple months of the year, you just may not have many options to look at, and you may not find anything you like. So typically we steer those downsizer clients towards like early spring list to put yourself in a buying position late spring, May, June, July, where there typically is more inventory.
Yeah, and I guess on the buy side, if you're a buyer and you have this mentality, I got to buy in December, January, February. That's when the market's down. Keep in mind, it's if you're buying a home, say in a neighborhood where Queens Park, New West, Glenbrook North, or Mount Pleasant, Vancouver, or Ioko, Port Moody. If you're buying a long-term home, you can't be picky on the timing of that purchase. Mm-hmm. If I were buying into a neighborhood that I wanted to put my family in for a long time, I'd be putting myself in a buying position and not expecting to pick something up in a couple months. Yeah. If you're patient, you have to wait for the right product to come on, and sometimes it can take a year or two in certain neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So if you're buying a box in the sky that's more generic and readily available, yes, take advantage of the seasonality. But if you're buying a long-term family home, beggars can't be choosers. You make that move when the house comes on the market. So if that's June in a bidding war with everyone else, it's a long-term property. Get in that bidding war. If it's, August and you think the fall is going to get worse and you think you're buying it at the tail end of summer right before prices dip, if it's a rare product and there's only one or two of them available every year or two, take advantage of that and don't look back. That's my thought anyway.
I think in summary, it really depends on your specific scenario, what type of home you'd be looking to purchase or what type of home you're looking to sell. So I think it's important to have those conversations early, regardless of whether you're thinking of listing or purchasing in the first couple months of the year. I like having those conversations early with clients in the year just to kind of game plan, and maybe the right situation for them is to wait till April, May to list their property. But I think it's important to kind of game plan and have those conversations early in the year.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to add is oftentimes if it is early January, like first week or two, mm-hmm. we're often guessing. On what to list a price. And if anyone gives you a confident evaluation, yeah, maybe there are exceptions, but for the most part, everyone's kind of guessing. We're coming off holidays, whoever knows what the fall is, but if you are the first listing to hit the market in January, you're taking a wild stab at where you think the price should be. You don't know what other listings are going to pop up over those next few weeks that are going to compete with you, mm-hmm. and it is a bit of a guessing game. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it makes sense. Anyway, any other thoughts to add there, Denny?
No. We love having those conversations early in the year, so reach out.
Yeah, and it's case by case that we need to really evaluate it. Anyway, that is all, folks. Thanks for listening.